Thank you so much for the introduction. And I wanted to also say that Andrew McDonald is here with us as well. He is the coder behind Voyant and Spyral Notebooks. So I just wanted to let you know that he's here and will probably help me with some of the technical questions. So that's not my area of expertise. Okay, so I see some familiar faces from Tuesday, so I'm glad to see you back. And today I'm going to talk mostly about Spyral Notebooks. We call them Spyral Notebooks because they're because they were designed after the idea of a spiral notebook, but since they were made in Quebec using the French pronunciation, but Spyral Notebooks is also fine. So I'm going to talk mostly about using Voyant in conjunction with those notebooks, but in so doing, we're going to get into some more specifics about using Voyant as opposed to Tuesday, where it was more of an introduction. So first of all, I just wanted to get a sense of, has everyone here used Voyant? If you have used it in the past, could you just raise your digital, or well, yeah, your digital hand, or I guess your real hand if you on video. Obviously not a requirement, but I just kind of wanted to get a sense if people are at least somewhat familiar with the tool. Looks like at least a few people have used it before. Okay, and if you haven't, that's totally fine. I'm still going to kind of go through a little bit of an introduction to Voyant, but yeah, I just want to get a sense of that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the material for today. All right. So as I said, today is going to be, I'm going to be introducing Spyral Notebooks, telling you what they are, but then I'm going to go through the notebooks, a couple different notebooks that you can work through yourself, and those have a lot of Voyant tools embedded in them. So rest assured, you will see a lot of Voyant here today as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and make this an actual presentation. Okay. So we've got the blue owl for Spyral Notebooks, if you are familiar with Voyant, the red owl, but we have a blue owl. Okay. So what are Spyral Notebooks? So they are a literate programming extension to Voyant Tools. And if you're not familiar with Voyant, Voyant is a environment, a tool, an in-browser tool for literary text analysis, or really for any text analysis, but it was designed for literary text analysis. So Spyral Notebooks are an extension of Voyant, and they are a notebook programming environment. And it's totally fine if you don't know what that is either. Basically, this is a place where you can take elements of Voyant, put them into a notebook, like if you can think about it as a notebook that you might have a lab notebook or something like that, your notes as you're doing your analysis. And there are both code blocks, JavaScript code that you can use to interact with Voyant and do more advanced textual analysis. And then there are text blocks where you can write either notes for yourself or notes for other people. Or if you're thinking more of a presentation style, you can write up a presentation to demonstrate what you're doing in Voyant. So there's a lot of possibility in these notebooks. They use JavaScript for the code. And again, you don't need to know any JavaScript to use these notebooks. And especially today, you don't need to know any at all. Once you get a little more familiar with Spyral, you don't need that much knowledge of JavaScript to do a lot of the basic stuff. So don't be scared off because of that. But the more JavaScript you know, obviously, the more you would be able to do with this. So there are embedded interactive panels. So I will show you those in a second. But what that means is that as you can see on the screen, this Cirrus tool from Voyant is embedded into the notebook, and you can interact with it the same way you would on the Voyant website, meaning you can click on it, you can edit the parameters and things like that. And yeah, as I said, this gives you a chance to document your research and also write dynamic papers with these results embedded. So there's a lot of possibility to these notebooks. Okay, so today in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the background of Spyral. So just a little bit about the project. Obviously, I'm going to introduce the notebooks and tell you why you might want to use them, and then tell you what makes them unique from other notebook environments, why they're beneficial, why using notebook environments in general is beneficial, and especially Spyral, and then obviously I will demonstrate some Spyral notebooks. So that's going to be this short presentation part of this, and then I'm going to share with you links to the notebooks so that you can start interacting with them yourself. Because again, just like on Tuesday, I really want people to be able to use these tools during this time, because a lot of things make more sense when you're clicking through them yourself. Okay, so this project began in 2017 as an extension of Voyant. Professors Stefan Sinclair and Jeffrey Rockwell had been experimenting with Mathematica and Jupyter notebooks. So if you're familiar with either of those are notebook environments. And they were writing a book called Epistemologica that would replicate some of the innovative tools and techniques that notebook environments offer. So Spyral was really thought of as a way to extend Voyant and to allow people to document and share their research. Because if you've worked with Voyant, you know that you can export images or tools from Voyant to share it. But beyond that, there's not a great way to share what you found in Voyant. And this really allows you to share with other people the analysis that you've done in Voyant. And there's also a great potential for teaching how to make arguments using Voyant with this notebook environment. So showing students how they can think through digital literary textual analysis. It's a little bit harder to grade, for example, like someone's work with Voyant. These notebooks are a great way to actually have students write out what they're doing and then easily share them with you as an instructor. And it was designed to be very user-friendly. So you don't need to have a lot of coding experience or any to use it. Open source and then very much integrated with Voyant. Okay. So as I said, Spyral notebooks are, at this point, I think it's clear, they're a companion to Voyant. They are a notebook environment and they have text and code blocks. And one of the greatest things about them is that they are very useful for collaboration and for saving your results from Voyant. So these notebooks, you can share them with colleagues or students, and they can easily click through them themselves. And you'll see that when I share the links with you. And you can save them yourself. So essentially forking the notebooks. But one really great thing is you don't have to download anything to your computer. You don't have to have the same environments or dependencies on your computer as the person who wrote the notebook. It's very simple to collaborate with these notebooks. Okay, and we're really inspired, I shouldn't say we, but I was not one of the people who wrote these, but creators were inspired by the idea of literate coding. And this comes from Donald Knuth, who's a very big name in the computer science world, who has said that instead of imagining that our main task is to instruct a computer what to do, let us concentrate rather on explaining to human beings what we want a computer to do. So the idea of a notebook environment is really that the code is written for the computer, and then you have these text moments where you are writing to explain to other humans or even to yourself what the computer should be doing. Because we don't read computer code the way that a computer does, and it's very hard for humans to parse code unless you're an expert in that. So if you're familiar with Jupyter notebooks, Google Colab or Mathematica, those are also notebook environments. So what makes Spyral different from these other notebooks is that it's free and it's open source. There's no setup required, as I said. All you need is a URL to start. It's integrated with Voyant Tools and it uses JavaScript, whereas the others use either R or Python. Okay, so I'm not going to play this demonstration video because I am here to demonstrate to you in person. So instead, I'm going to share with you a notebook that was created by Jeffrey Rockwell about topic modeling, which kind of just gives you a sense of what you can do with a Spyral notebook. So as you can see up here, we've got text explaining the notebook, and then also some links to articles about topic modeling. So that's one really nice thing you can do here, is quickly show people where you're getting your research from and then link to those sources. And so here we can see the topic tool from Voyant, which is one of the newer tools in Voyant. You can see how this tool has been embedded into this notebook. And here is the code that makes that happen. So essentially this code calls up this tool from Voyant, and it loads a corpus, the Frankenstein corpus here. And then we can see topics from Frankenstein using the topic modeling built into Voyant. And if you're not familiar with topic modeling, basically what it does is it is a way to link terms or to create lists of terms that are linked in a text based on their frequency in a text and also how close they are to each other. And in theory, you should be able to look at one of these topics and identify some kind of common theme, although, you know, that's up to you as the researcher. So for example, for Frankenstein, we have this topic with the words life, ghost, world, tale, true, pillow, dark, opened, like, and pale. So if anyone wants to identify what that topic is, I mean, to me, I'm not having an easy time coming up with some unifying theme for that, but that's kind of the nature of topic modeling. And, you know, this is just an example of something that you can do in a Spyral notebook, is kind of use this topic tool. And you can see in the code up here, what we're able to do is refine this tool. So we've determined the number of topics that have been returned. So there's 10 topics here. And then we've just said a little bit about how this should be embedded into Spyral. So if none of this is making any sense to you, that's okay. I really just kind of want to show you what you can do eventually with a Spyral notebook, and why you would kind of want to use it beyond just Voyant. So again, here we can see more topic modeling, and the topics are returned as a list of words instead of this embedded tool from Voyant. So you might be thinking, like, if you wanted to do something beyond just come up with the topics, how would you get this information out of Voyant? Like, removing this list of topics from Voyant, you might not understand how to do that. Like, you could try to copy and paste them, but that's probably not going to work that great. So that's another thing that Spyral allows you to do, is work with, you know, the actual text results of these tools. We can also graph the words from the topics using Voyant again. So here we have the different words from one of the topics, and we can see where those terms are located in the text. Or we can graph a single topic as a trend. So this is one topic as it appears in Frankenstein. So you can kind of get a sense of the possibilities here. We can also compare topics, etc. So, like I said, this is just an example of kind of the possibilities of Spyral. All right, so now what I would like to do is move into giving you an introduction to actually using the notebooks. And I'm going to give you all this link so that you can click through it yourself. So I invite you to open the link and work through this Spyral notebook. I have here written out what I've explained in the introductory presentation about notebook environments. And then I designed this to be very interactive. So you can read, one important piece of information is that anything that's followed by 2 dashes in these code blocks is a comment, meaning that it's not going to be read by the computer as code. It's just me or whoever wrote the code telling you something. So for example, this is a code block. What happens when you click the play button on the left? And we can see what happens. Well, we see that it prints out hello world. I think that the interface to Spyral Notebooks is pretty intuitive. For the code blocks, the way that you run the code, basically tell the computer to do the thing in the code, you're going to hit the play button. And then what is returned, so the result of this code block is going to be down below. I'm going to talk about this button later, so don't worry about that too much for now. You can also see that there is an add new cell button if you want to add cells to your notebook or delete cells. But right now, I think we should all look through this notebook a little bit and kind of click through the different options and see what happens. And I will be available for questions, and then we will continue. And I'm going to talk a lot more about the actual nuts and bolts of using Spyral, including saving things, getting your own corpus into Spyral, etc. Oh, and thank you to the person who put the link in the Slack channel. Okay, so I do see a question in the chat, which is, can you make a notebook read only? So that's a good question. I'm not entirely, so it depends on what you mean by read only, I guess. If you mean in a way that you wouldn't be able to run the code cells, no. I don't think there's a way to do that. If you mean just so that no one else could edit it, right, okay, that's what you're asking. No, not allowing other people to edit it. So no one can edit people. There's no way to make it so that no one could edit it entirely, to the best of my knowledge, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong. However, when you save a notebook, you're saving it with your own Spyral account or account through GitHub, which I'm going to go through how to save these notebooks. And anytime you would make a change to a notebook, you would have to save it with a new notebook ID, so it would change the URL. So like if you were to edit this notebook, you can't edit it and then save it and have the same URL, essentially like my notebook. You wouldn't be able to edit my notebook, but you could change one thing, save it under a new name, and then that would be your notebook. If that makes sense. I'm going to talk through saving the notebooks as well, so maybe I'll answer that a little bit more clearly then. But yeah, in terms of just like a hard and fast, like no editing at all, I don't think there's a way to do that at the current time. But I mean, part of the idea behind these notebooks is that they kind of should be editable and shareable. We are working on a catalog feature for the notebooks that will allow users to see all the notebooks that are available. So notebooks that other people have made, but there is going to be a way to kind of have a private notebook where it won't be like available to people. And the only way that someone could edit your notebook is if you shared the URL with them. So in that sense, it's pretty unlikely that someone would just find your notebook URL and like start editing it. Okay, does anyone else have questions from clicking through this? Basically, what I want to show with this notebook is that we can take the tools from Voyant and embed them into our notebooks, and that we can do things like search in the tools themselves. So for example, here we have the trends tool, which shows us the frequency of terms across a text or texts. In this case, we're working with Jane Austen. So this is across Jane Austen's oeuvre. So we have the word love, and we can see that that was used a lot more in the first text that she wrote, Love and Friendship. But we might have our doubts about, is that actually representative, or is it because the name love is in the title of the text? But if we wanted to search for a different term, like for example, if we want to test my theory that love is overly represented in Love and Friendship, then maybe I'm curious about the term friendship. So we can just replace the term love with friendship, run the code cell, and we can see that my theory is indeed incorrect, maybe, because friendship is actually much more prevalent in Lady Susan, not love and friendship. Right. And we also see here that we can search for multiple terms, which was asked at the beginning. So that's just to give you like a very small taste of how Spyral notebooks work. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through more of the nuts and bolts of Spyral and Voyant together. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to paste this in the chat once I find the right thing. Okay. So here is a much longer notebook that is going to walk you through essentially all of the nuts and bolts of Spyral. And then, as I said, some more features from Voyant so that you can see some more advanced things we can do with Voyant as well. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to go through this one a little bit more with you, just so that I'm not saying click through it for, it would probably take you a while to do that. And I think it'll be better if we kind of are all on the same page. But as before, I definitely invite you to ask questions as we're working through this. And yeah, don't be shy about that. So I'm going to show you how to edit, save, and load a notebook. So just kind of the logistics of using Spyral. How to get these panels from Voyant into your notebook, and what you might need to grow your notebook and expand it. And then finally, there's some resources so that you can use these notebooks further. So again, we have our very basic code block here where we're loading a corpus. This is the Jane Austen corpus, hence the name Austen. And we're loading up a tool from Voyant, which is the Cirrus tool. So this is your basic code block. And the way that we interact with the code blocks is by hitting the play button to run the code. The way that it works is that Voyant Spyral notebooks have already kind of pulled up the results in this notebook. So it looks like you don't have to hit the run button necessarily, but when you're writing your own notebook, you're going to need to hit that run button at least the first time to see the tool pop up. Because essentially this code cell is telling the computer, okay, get this corpus from Voyant, and then open the tool, the Cirrus tool. So if you want, you can envision that the way you would interact with this code, if you wanted to edit it, is to change either the corpus or the tool. Those are kind of the two things that you can do with this code. So as I said, Spyral notebooks are examples of literate coding. So they have both code cells, but then there's also text cells. And in order to edit text cells, I think editing code cells, it's fairly intuitive. You're going to just click and type. Editing text cells, same thing, but you have the option to work with HTML interface. And so I put a few exercises here you can try, like transform the sentence to be italicized or insert a picture of your favorite animal or plant into this text box. just to show you that you have a lot of options for the text. And this could be very useful for if you're presenting with Spyral, or like you want to use this as the way you write a paper, for example. You have a lot of options, and there is this HTML formatting bar that opens up too. So anything you can do with HTML, you can do in these text boxes rather. You could create links, for example, tables, all that kind of stuff. If you know HTML and you want to do extra fancy things, you can also just look at the source code and edit it that way. So any questions about editing either the text or the code blocks? As I mentioned, this is kind of the second exercise here. You can edit this text by pulling up a different corpus. So for example, if we don't want Austin, but we want Frankenstein, we can put the word Frank. I should mention that these three corpora, the Frankenstein, Jane Austen, and then there's a Shakespeare one as well. These are like the preloaded ones into Voyant. So most of the time, if you're working with your own corpus, it's not going to have a nice name. It's just going to be a string of letters and numbers. But so we can change this to be the Frankenstein corpus. So now we see instead of Jane Austen, we've got Frankenstein's terms. And we can also edit the tool. So if we don't want the Cirrus tool, but instead we want the Trends tool, we can change that. And now we have the Frankenstein Trends tool. Okay. And I've also shown that you can click on this question mark here, which gives you the documentation for Spyral Notebooks. And this is very useful, especially if you do already know JavaScript, to kind of drill down a little bit further and find out more information. So I did want to point out that that is there as well. Okay, so any questions about this initial editing? I guess I should point out, want to italicize, can do that. Inserting a picture is easy too. You're just going to click on this image button. And you might be thinking, why on earth would I be putting images in? But it could be very useful for screenshots or things like that. Or your favorite animal or plant. Okay. So moving on to adding or deleting cells. Again, this is very intuitive, I think. You're going to hover over a cell. If you want to add a cell, you hit the Add Cell button. And then you can select whether or not you want a text or a code cell. So we can add a text cell. We can add a code cell as many times as we want. If you want to delete a cell, then you can hit the trash can, and it's going to make sure that that's okay. Say yes. There you go. And I should point out this, what kind of cell is it? You can now select the kind of cell that you want. So I'm actually just get rid of that, showing you another example of editing the notebook. In an earlier version of Spyral, the cells alternated between code and text, but now you just happily get to choose it yourself. So that kind of explains this next question as well. You can also rearrange your cells. And the way you do that is by clicking on this little button here and moving them. You can click the arrows to move up or move down. So if you want to rearrange your cells, it's very easy to do that as well. You just need to click on this little button here. And then you'll notice in the code cell, when you click on this button, you see a lot more options. We're going to talk through those in a bit, but you still have the same move up and move down button available to you. So Oops. Okay, so I think that's pretty intuitive. I'm guessing no one has questions on that, but if you do, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, so now let's talk about saving your notebooks, which kind of goes to the read-only question. So Spyral notebooks are saved through GitHub. So what that means is that if you want to save a notebook, you're going to need to have a GitHub account. So if you don't have one, you can click on the link to sign up. If you do already have an account, then you're going to click on this little guy. This is not necessarily a guy, just this little person. And you're going to click on them and you'll see sign in with GitHub. When you click on that, it's going to take you to GitHub. I've already been signed in to GitHub, so but you'll see if you are not signed in, it'll just tell you to sign into your account, and then you're essentially authorizing Spyral to kind of access your GitHub and save your notebooks via GitHub. And once you've done that, to save your notebook, you're going to click on the cloud, and you have two options, save and save as. So save is only going to be an option if you are the author of the notebook. So in the URL, you can see this Learn Spyral. That is the GitHub account that we're using to create these notebooks. Learn Spyral @GH for GitHub. Your GitHub username is going to be here. So unless it's your name here, you're not going to be able to save the notebook until you edit something in it. But since it's my notebook, I can hit save and it's just going to save my notebook. You can also save as, which is going to allow you to save it with a new notebook ID. And it says optional here. I guess it's optional because it's going to update the URL with your GitHub account name. But highly recommend giving your notebook an ID. That's going to be the part that appears in the URL after your GitHub username. So for example, this one is HSS 2023. So that will help you to identify where your notebooks are. So when you save as with your own information, that essentially allows you to fork the notebook or save your own version of the notebook. So you can go ahead and save this notebook to your own GitHub account if you think you're going to want to refer to it later. So that is a nice feature that is there. So if anyone has any problems saving, let me know, or if you need time to sign up for GitHub, and certainly wait for people to kind of get there. Okay. So I'm going to skip over this loading an existing Spyral notebook for now, and move on to creating a new Spyral notebook from Voyant. I just think that makes a little more sense in the order. So one thing I want to point out is that you can also create a notebook directly from Voyant Tools. So I'm going to just go ahead and go to Voyant Tools. And I'm going to upload my own corpus here. In Voyant. So if you are new to Voyant and you've never used it, this is Voyant Tools. So this is the tool that I've been referencing so much that these notebooks work with. And essentially Voyant is just a series of tools, a series of, what's the word I'm looking for? A series of windows that do different things with a text. So you've got, for example, this series visualization from your corpus, and then all the different tools here. If you want to create a notebook directly from Voyant, a Spyral notebook, you can definitely do that. And the way that you would do that is by figuring out, first of all, what do you want to be in your notebook? So for example, if you're me and you've uploaded this corpus and it's Anne of Green Gables and you think, oh my gosh, this word cloud is amazing, and I think that I can write a very compelling argument with it. For example, maybe you're interested in the word said. It's such a prominent term, which is not surprising, I guess, because there's a lot of dialogue in this text. But maybe you're looking at dialogue patterns in novels, and that's part of the story that you want to tell. You can go to the options tool. I mean, sorry, not the options, the export button for any of the tools. And you're going to see here, export a URL for this view. So that's just going to open this tool bigger in another window. You can also go to export view tools and data and go down to here where you have the option for a new Spyral notebook for this tool and this data. So this tool meaning the Cirrus tool, and this data meaning this corpus, Anne of Green Gables. I hit export, and now I have a notebook with my corpus, which is very useful because, like I said, this is what your corpus is normally going to look like. It's just a very long string of letters and numbers, and it can be hard to type that into, Spyral. This gives you that very nicely, and this tool. I run the cell, and there we go. Now I've got my Anne of Green Gables Cirrus visualization. So that's a really nice way to create a notebook, and you can see that it's going to automatically have the title, Spyral Notebook imported from Voyant Tools. All of this is editable, so I can change my title to be, the usage of dialogue in Anne of Green Gables, let's say. Oops. Here is the button I was talking about with including this in the public catalog so that other people could see it. I don't think I need to do that since this is sort of a fake notebook. You can include a description if you so desire. You can select a license. So this kind of also goes to the read-only question. And then you can also specify the language of your notebook. All right, so you can save that. And then here you see that your Spyral, your GitHub username is the author of this notebook. You can also change that. So if you want to make it your own name, instead of, for example, if you created your GitHub account with a goofy name or something, you can change that. Okay, so that's another way to open a notebook, open a Spyral notebook. Okay, from Voyant. Other ways to make a new notebook are to click on create a new Spyral notebook in a new window here. So then you have a new one, or you can also just go to this URL. So you've got a lot of ways to kind of create your own notebook. Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point about making a new notebook? Okay. So that's kind of the basics of using Spyral. But now we can go through how would you actually do some analysis, because after all, that's what you're going to want to be doing. So the rest of the notebook is devoted to actual text analysis tasks. So for example, we have the ability to look at the trends tool with the Jane Austen corpus here. And unfortunately, I've given away the answer to the exercise because the visualization has already loaded. But hopefully you can see that the trends tool is the one that we are loading here because we see trends in the code. So this is the trends tool from Voyant, which again is showing us the frequency of terms used across the corpus, in this case, the Jane Austen corpus. But let's say that I wanted to look at my own corpus, my Anne of Green Gables corpus. I could go here, get my corpus ID, change this to be my own corpus. And now I can see the same query, which was for she and he, in Anne of Green Gables. So hopefully you're starting to get a sense of how you can kind of edit these notebooks. And one of the ideas that we've had is creating lots of notebooks like this, where the code is already written and all you need to do is kind of edit it with your own search terms and your own corpus. So you don't have to know a lot of code. You don't have to be the one to actually like create this code. Although if you wanted to, hopefully you can see that it's actually not that intimidating. All we're telling the computer to do is load a corpus from Voyant, call up a tool, and search for some things. All that this style stuff is doing is just making this box bigger so that it looks nicer in the notebook. So if you wanted to search for different terms instead of she and he, let's say I want to look for said and, replied, since I'm interested in dialogue. Now we can look and see that said is very prevalent, and replied is like hardly ever used. So clearly that's not the term that was used in response. Maybe said, there's no replied, or is there an answered? We can just do answer, and that will give us all the instances. Not really. So said was very much the way that dialogue perhaps was used in this text. Okay. So I've done a lot of talking, and I want to make sure that I get to kind of the most important thing, which is uploading your own corpus to Spyral. So what I've done so far, I've been using corpora from Voyant in Spyral. Like, as you saw, I already created this corpus in Voyant. That was when we were here. And then I got the URL from, not the URL, the notebook ID, which is also in the URL in Voyant, corpus equals. But I got that here from my Spyral notebook. But let's say that you know that you just want to use Spyral. You don't really need Voyant. You just want to upload your corpus directly to Spyral. And there's a lot of really good options in Spyral. So let's go down to uploading a corpus directly. This is just telling you what I basically already told you about getting your information from Voyant. So recently, Andrew has updated this interface. So if you've heard about Spyral or used it before, this is new, and it's very exciting because it makes it a lot easier to upload your own corpus. So how you're going to do this, you're going to click on in a code block. And actually, I'm going to open a new code block so I can show you from the very beginning. So you have a code block, and you're going to click on this little, I'm still mulling over what to call this box, but this option box, I guess, let's say. And you're going to go to this configuration button, and you see cell mode. You have that you're in JavaScript, that's the default, but then you have options for data. And you're going to click on this corpus button and hit OK. And now you can see that you have options for creating a new corpus in Spyral. So you have the input for your corpus. You can tell it what you're inputting. If it is text, that means that you're going to be actually like typing text here. If it's a variable, then you're going to be clicking on notebook variables. That's a little bit more advanced. So I'm not going to go through that now. Probably what you're going to want is to upload a file. So you're going to be going to File, and then File Upload. And this, just like with the Voyant homepage, you're just going to choose the file that you want from your computer, your text file. You're going to open it. And then one really nice thing is you can go to Options, and here are all of the options that you have in Voyant when you are creating a corpus. So for example, If you're working with a table, you can specify how you're going to work with that table here. If you are working with something that has X paths and you want to define what Voyant should consider a text, you can do that. If you want to change how Voyant processes the text, for example, if you want to tell it that, well, I guess you can change the text to ancient Greek, Tibetan, or Chinese. And actually, I don't remember if the person who was working with the Iliad, I think I might have seen them here today, but anyway, I should have told you, you could have changed it to ancient Greek. Okay, and then you can also change the tokenization, although we recommend the automatic version. So I know there's a lot like coming at you, so I'm just going to walk through this one more time. You are going to go to your button here, configuration, select the corpus option. Then you're going to click on the input you want, which is going to be a file. You're going to upload your file. You can change the options if you want. And then you're going to give your corpus a name under data name. So I'm going to make mine Anne, and you're going to hit assign. And then it's going to create your corpus. And I see there's some activity in the chat. So, oh, David Wilson. Okay, yeah, you're here. Yeah, so that would have been nice. Okay, hamburger menu. I like that. Okay, so now we have a new corpus in Voyant, and we can refer to that with this name Anne, which I should have made lowercase, but I can. So this is just a duplication of the cell that's already there. Okay, so I will give you a moment to try to upload your own corpus into Spyral using this new functionality. But remember, if you are ever having issues, you can always just go to Voyant and create a notebook from Voyant, which is a little bit simpler, but this option is really nice. And this options button, this is the same interface that's on Voyant. So when you start creating a corpus with Voyant, this is exactly the same interface. So I should point out that all these options are also available here. And then this creating a corpus documentation very nicely goes through all of these input format options. So if you're interested in using tables, for example, actually, I'll just get through it this way. There is very nice documentation about how to use your tables and tell Voyant what part of your table you want to consider a text. So I will go ahead and put this link in the chat as well for these creating a corpus options. I just get the link that is for the entire page, not just the tables. Chat. Okay. Okay, so we don't have that much time left. So I want to go through a couple other things before we run out of time. Once you have created your own corpus with this data name, you should be able to, throughout this notebook, refer to your corpus with its nice name. So now you get to be like Jane Austen and Shakespeare and just refer to your corpus with a nice name, not that very long string of letters and numbers, which is nice. So for example, I have here load corpus Anne, that's from up here, my Anne of Green Gables corpus, and I'm gonna get the summary tool, which again, that just pulls up this summary. Sorry, let me just reopen my corpus in Voyant. So here's the summary tool in Voyant. And here's my notebook. Here's the summary tool in my notebook. So you can always interact with these tools the same way that you do in Voyant. Like if you want to increase, well, this isn't really relevant here, but if you want to interact with the tool, let's say you want to change the options, you can do all of that by just clicking, but you can also do that in the code itself, and then it would save your exact, what you've exactly changed, which makes more sense with a different tool. So for example, here you can see that we've kind of saved our search query to have said an answer. This code is always going to search for said an answer, whereas in Voyant, it's going to default to the most commonly used terms here. So when I open my corpus in Voyant, the trends tool is showing me the most commonly used terms, those trends. And I can search here for anything I want, but it's not really going to save it, that search. Once I reload this page, we're gonna be back here. So that's a really powerful usage for Voyant, for Spyral, is that you can save it so that you're searching for these specific things. And this visualization is kind of stable. Okay. So the last elements of this are looking at frequencies and distributions. So actually getting into, like I said, a little bit more actual analysis. And so I invite you to kind of just play around with this. Once you've uploaded your corpus, you should be able to kind of edit these visualizations with your own corpus, and play around with, searching for interesting things. We've got the terms tool here, the term collocates using the terms berry tool, which I touched on briefly on Tuesday, but you can play with it in a little bit more detail, as well as the links tool. And then also, I guess, this collocates graph tool as well. So for each of these, you should be able to change to your own corpus. And now I'm looking at the terms used in my Anne of Green Gables corpus. I should point out that you can always click on, if you're in the terms tool, you can always click on this more button, and that will give you even more information about a term. So for example, we can see the distribution of the term Anne across Anne of Green Gables. We see that it's used 1,112 times, which makes sense. It's co-located frequently with Marilla, Diana, said, Anne, and Shirley. And then we can also see some phrases that use this term. And one thing that is really useful for this kind of analysis is that we can see, okay, the phrases are Anne comes to grief in an affair of honor. Anne comes to grief in an affair of. Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. And you might start to think, oh, those seem like they are either chapter titles or titles of the book. So maybe, maybe I need to rethink this, because perhaps Anne is being misrepresented. Like, we're looking at things outside of the text itself, and maybe that's why Anne is used so much, although, or for example, and we can also click and go right back to Voyant, which is nice, and look at my said term. But we can look at said, and I guess get a sense of how that term is being used in these phrases. So that's kind of the terms tool, some things you can do with that. And like I said, you can always hover over the search bar in Voyant, the search icon, I guess, and it will tell you exactly how to search for particular terms if you wanted to look for a certain term or set of terms. And you can get pretty specific with this. So for example, if you wanted to look for two terms, which someone asked at the beginning. Like I said, you're going to use that pipe. So if we wanted to search for both, I don't know, island, and I have to remember where the pipe is. This takes me a second. Okay, island and sea. Then we can search for both of those terms. And here we have both of those terms. Similarly, with the trends tool here, we can replace Jane Austen with your own corpus and search for whatever you would like to see in the terms. I here had weather, sunny, and windy. So this is actually kind of interesting. We can see that sunny and windy are not really represented at all in Anne of Green Gables, but there's a lot of weather towards the end of the text. So perhaps there's a storm. I haven't read it in a long time, but yeah, maybe there's a big weather event at the end of that novel. If anyone remembers, feel free to chime in. Okay, yeah, so I will let you play around with these different tools. I want to point out at the end.
Kaylin, I think you just muted yourself.
Yes, I realized that. It's always hard with I'm clicking on the screen, and then there's also that little Zoom bar as well. I was just saying, so there are these further resources you can click on at the bottom of this notebook. And Spyral is still kind of developing it, still working on it. It's always in flux. So if you find anything that you think could be different, I think Andrew's always open to suggestions, or if you find something that doesn't work. And yeah, well, I think it's a very powerful tool for making your Voyant, for both saving your results, sharing them with other people, and then kind of creating an argument about a text in a way that you can't quite do with Voyant, or even for something as simple as if you have a lot of elements in Voyant that you like you create a word cloud that you really like, instead of going through the process of exporting a photo of that word cloud and then it's static, it's not, you can't interact with it. You can collect all of the cool visualizations in one spot and share them with other people very quickly. And I think it is no small thing that when you share a notebook, people don't have to have the text of that corpus on their computer. They don't have to download anything. It's very easy to share these notebooks, which is also one of their best features, in my opinion, having worked with some other notebooks where you don't have to do that. Okay, so there's a comment about the stop word list. Yes, so there is definitely information about how to change the stop word list in Spyral, which is very useful. So yeah, thank you for that link. And I also wanted to point out, we are working on creating many documentation notebooks for Spyral. I will put this tutorial table of contents for all the tutorials and notebooks we've made here. Oops, that is not the right link. Let me just get the right link real quick, sorry. Some of these are not done entirely, so your patience is appreciated, but you can see here we've been creating many notebooks. We have a whole series called Using Spyral Notebooks, which is just about the interface itself. And we also have, I'm working on creating notebooks for each of the tools, showing you exactly what you can do in Spyral, how you can change these tools. These are not quite done yet. So if you do look at them, just to, know I'm still working on them. And then we are also working on some recipes showing you specific things you could do in Spyral. So for example, if you want to know how to do topic modeling, then you can click on that notebook and kind of work through it. So more to come. We're still working on this, but yeah, we're excited about it. So, okay, yeah, so that's pretty much it from me in terms of the material for the workshop. Like I said, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'll just stop sharing my screen.